These creatures cannot be considered human. They attack and they feed only on warm human flesh.
Zombies have been back in vogue for years now, but we have one film to thank for them all. Night of the Living Dead took drive-ins by storm in 1968 and provided us with our first look at these terrifying ghouls. By the time Dawn of the Dead came around in the 1970s, audiences weren't expecting the wild ride that followed. As dire as most zombie films are, the mall setting makes this almost like a playground, until most of them die. By the time Day of the Dead came around in the 1980s, the world had changed a lot, and so had the zombies. Considerably more rotten and terrifying, we get a strong military presence that doesn't ever seem to leave the series. Because what's so great about these films isn't the gore or the zombies themselves. It's the social commentary by the film's creator, George Romero. He doesn't just show lumbering ghouls, he reflects society in them. So we're here to tell you what the f you need to know about George Romero's Of the Dead franchise. George Romero created zombies as we know them today. Before, they were just mindless beings, often controlled by some sort of voodoo. But Romero brought these flesh eaters to life with the sole purpose to feed and spread their disease. But they were simply the creatures used to convey his message. Whether it's about capitalism, consumerism, or even classism, Romero always goes a layer deeper.
You're coming from a meeting regarding the explosion of the Venus probe, is that right?
The origin of these standard zombie has always been a mystery and one that George doesn't answer. So that's not going to be something we answer for you here. But the zombie as we know them has basic motor function with the sole purpose of eating flesh. No brains here. If you get bit or so much as scratched by one of these things, you're going to become one of them. They lumber around and mostly follow the food. Though they've also been known to go to places that they enjoyed in their past lives. We've also seen them evolve throughout the series, from mindless to being able to use tools and even form groups and fire guns. Romero was always looking to evolve the ghouls in some way. Romero is a Pittsburgh-based filmmaker that combined his talents with John Russo, amongst many others, to create commercials. Eventually, they would combine forces for a horror film about ghouls attacking a farmhouse. It was a massive hit, launching the careers of Romero and Russo, but the two creatives couldn't agree on a direction for the future of the franchise. And given that Night was in the public domain, a mistake made when switching the title from Night of Anubis to Night of the Living Dead, neither needed the other's permission to do what they wanted. So Romero set out to make his own sequels, and Russo started up the Return of the Living Dead brand. Maybe if you're interested, we'll cover that series soon. But for now, let's get into all the movies that make up Romero's zombie franchise.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child!
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
First, we had Night of the Living Dead in 1968. This would follow Barbara and her brother Johnny going to the cemetery to visit their father's grave. While there, Johnny is attacked and killed by a mysterious man, and Barbara runs off to a nearby farmhouse. There she meets Ben, and it turns out there's another group of people hiding away in the basement. With conflicting views, they're never in agreement about what to do next. This results in all but Ben being attacked and eaten by zombies. The film ends with one of the darkest endings in cinema history, as the day is saved, and yet Ben is still shot by locals. As far as memorable characters, you could practically include everyone here. Barbara is so catatonic that someone needs to slap some sense into her, and Johnny has one of the most iconic lines. But Ben is definitely one of the best heroes we could ever ask for.
What the hell are they?
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk here.
Romero took a decade to follow up, but he finally did in 1978 with Dawn of the Dead. Also released in Europe as Zombie, We follow 4 people who are just trying to survive the chaos of the zombie apocalypse. They take a helicopter from the news station that 2 of them work at. While flying to get to some sort of safety, they find a shopping mall which serves as their salvation. Unfortunately, their time is cut short by a gang dead set on taking them for all they've got. While the zombies may be blue, we get some of the best gore of all time courtesy of Tom Savini. Peter and Fran barely escape with their lives, and the film ends with them flying off with limited gas and no hope. Everyone is memorable here, with Peter and Roger providing that macho swagger that makes them look like they're on top of every situation. Fran starts so timid and yet grows into a strong woman by the end. And while Flyboy is a bit of a shit, he provides us with one of the coolest looking zombies ever. And I guess I should shout out Tom Savini's blades.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time!
The sequel finally came in 1985, titled Day of the Dead. While Romero originally wanted a much bigger film, the events here are well into the zombie apocalypse, with few humans left alive. There's an underground bunker in the Everglades that a group of scientists and military types have holed up in. They're doing a bunch of experiments to see if there's any way to properly defeat the dead, or to coexist with them. They're even having great success with these zombies starting to show intelligence. But the 2 sides just don't get along, and eventually zombies overtake the base. Thankfully though, our lead, Sarah, and 2 of the blue-collar chopper pilots escape. Captain Rhodes is one of the most memorable characters in any film, let alone this one. He's just spewing out lines of pure gold, and his death is amazing. He's also got some pretty good stooges. Sarah is strong from the beginning and doesn't really have much of a journey to go on, but she's still great. Dr. Logan, otherwise known as Dr. Frankenstein, is one of the more eclectic performances. And finally, we have Bub, the zombie that Logan was teaching, and the one that everyone will be remembering when the credits roll.
In a world where the dead are returning to life, the word trouble loses much of its meaning.
In the longest break of the series' history, 2005 finally brought us Land of the Dead. Set in Pittsburgh, the city has been walled off from the undead. They send people out to go on supply runs, and the city operates in an almost caste-like system, with the rich living in a large skyscraper called Fiddler's Green. To accomplish these supply runs, they have a massive combat truck called the Dead Reckoning. But when Cholo steals it and ransoms the city, his rival Riley must set out to get it back. Unfortunately for them, a group of zombies has been on a march towards the city and are ready to feast. The city is taken over in epic fashion. Eventually, the film ends with Riley taking the Dead Reckoning on a mission to Canada, never to be heard from again. Simon Baker's Riley doesn't have much personality, but he's the audience surrogate. His right-hand man, Charlie, is a reliable loser, and Slack is just badass looking. Dennis Hopper's Hoffman is a wonderfully rich asshole that you're just waiting to get his comeuppance. Leguizamo's Cholo has some of the more entertaining lines of the film, even if his character comes off like a bit of a dummy. Then finally, we have the main zombie, Big Daddy, who proves to be quite resourceful.
There's always an audience for horror, believable horror, but who's gonna believe a mummy if his makeup's all unglued?
Who's gonna believe a mummy in the first place?
2007 brought us Diary of the Dead, and the series went the found footage route. Instead of taking place deep into the zombie apocalypse, we're in the first week of the events. So think Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead era, only considerably less fun. We follow a group of students who are making a horror film when the events start. With cameras on hand, they decide to document the events as they try and find out what's going on. This is a much smaller approach than Land, and is considerably more grounded. We end on several characters ending up in a panic room, questioning whether humanity is even worth saving in the first place. There's not really anyone here that's memorable in this one. They're all extremely forgettable.
What if you die and get up and walk? Would any of us be strict enough to gun you down?
You won't have to. I'll shoot myself.
Romero kept up his fast production streak and brought us his next and final film in the series with 2009's Survival of the Dead. This is the most that any film in the series is connected with any other, with the opening actually showing the soldiers that had robbed the characters from Diary. But this isn't really about them. No, this is about an island off the coast of Delaware that is home to two feuding families, the Muldoons and the O'Flynns. Their main point of contention is that the O'Flynns are killing off all the zombies on the island for safety, but the Muldoons are keeping their relatives alive until they can find a cure. You can imagine how this goes. Eventually, the island is overrun, with a few people being able to escape on a ferry. I guess if I had to choose anyone, it would be this soldier named Nicotine. And that's just because he was in the last film, so I actually know who he is. Otherwise, everyone here is, again, just so damn forgettable. Now that we've gotten through the movies, what must you see, what can you skip, and what should you check out if you've got the time? This is a pretty easy one. As far as essential viewings, you can't go wrong with Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. Each of them is an absolute classic. Then, if you've got time, you can check out Land of the Dead. It's nice to see what George can do with a big budget. But then you can absolutely avoid Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead, as they fail to bring much of anything to the table. There have been a litany of spin-offs and remakes of George's work, so let's go through the most notable real quick. In 1990, Tom Savini directed a remake of Night of the Living Dead, which was considerably more gory. Zack Snyder directed the fast-paced Dawn of the Dead remake in 2004. And there have been so many iterations of Day of the Dead, but unfortunately none of them are even worth giving a spotlight to. In terms of other mediums, Romero wrote a comic series titled Empire of the Dead in 2013, which introduced vampires to the mix. The novel The Living Dead was co-written with Romero and Daniel Kraus. This tale spans 15 years, but was unfortunately finished posthumously, as Romero passed away from lung cancer before being able to complete it. With Romero's death in 2017, we can officially declare the end of the Romero zombie franchise. While there have been plenty of spin-offs over the years, nothing quite hits the same level of quality that Romero brought. George had been developing a script that would serve as the ending of his series, titled Twilight of the Dead. Unfortunately though, he passed before the script was completed. While the movie is still in development with his widow Suzanne supervising, the likelihood of it capturing the same magic of the first few Romero films is rather unlikely. Heck, even Romero himself was unable to do that with his last couple. So this is one series that I think should stay dead. What do you think? Would you like to see more? What other franchises would you like to see us cover? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one.